Hello again. Welcome back. Today, we're discussing skin tones, what goes into them, and how to make your own. Skin tones are perhaps one of the most challenging colors to render realistically. Not only do they come in a variety of different styles, but they have a great amount of colors used in them and a careful balance that makes making them yourself a little bit difficult. However, with some knowledge as to what goes into them, how we abstract the skin tone in our art forms, we can have a better understanding of how to make them for ourselves. Skin is difficult to render because it is naturally non-uniform. It does not respond well to flat colors, and it naturally shifts and moves as light interacts with it, along with your own body. But before you can actually go into the biology of what goes into a skin and how to render it that way, you need to understand the color itself and what goes into that first. People would usually be a little intimidated to paint something that has so much open skin, such as this cyborg model here. But I'm going to tell you that it is not so challenging once you have some understanding as to what goes into them. For the purposes of making this video that much easier to understand, we're going to be focusing on lighter skin tones for now. However, all of this information helps in the development of your own African skin tones and anything in between.
Let's begin with the perspective that we had no pre-made flesh tone paints, and we had to construct a flesh color from more simplistic tones. What would we use? Let's begin with the abstractions of skin from other mediums that have a limited capacity and color. Mediums like comics or animation don't have the time or budget to render the subtle variations in a skin, so they use flat tones. It doesn't take much examination to see that Caucasian skin tone is usually some sort of peach or a pink tone. This leads to two colors right off the bat, red and white. And in terms of efficiency, this does convey some degree of realism. A human is made out of flesh and blood, and that aforementioned blood incurs a reddish tone to skin. This pink is one that any child and a great deal of adults would accept as being a flesh tone. However, it is not quite correct. While this is perhaps the quickest and simplest way to create a skin, this resulting pink makes someone look like some sort of wiener rather than a real person, or perhaps King Charles's fingers. You can control this by pulling back on the red used in the mixture, but the resulting cool pink is still some distance off from realistic. To make this tone more believable, you need to have some extra degree of warmth present in this mix, which red alone cannot create by itself. The solution then is to use a bit of yellow. This mixture is now much closer to what we perceive as realistic. This resulting mix is vibrant and lively, good for something like a pinup or an advertisement of some sort. This is close to the tone of many brands' sunny skin tone paints. We can come to the logical conclusion from this and see that an orange mixed with white is a good base for flesh, as it contains both red and yellow. This pyro orange makes a rather nice skin. Not too red, but warm enough to be red is basically real. This would be effective for conveying some fair maiden in a tower, ready to be rescued by a knight in shining armor. But it is too simplistic for painting a bust or a portrait, where flesh is a larger focus. To remedy this, we need to reduce the intensity of the paint into something a bit more gray. If we look to some of the work of old masters, we see the movement of botched painting. This greenish underpainting method would be painted over with more common flesh tones, and the resulting mix would have a good deal of realism. And if we look to the photos of real people, we can go down to the pixel level and see that there's a presence of subtle green notes in the flesh, particularly in the shadows. So the presence of green is a subtle but important contributing factor towards realistic skin. To create this, we only need to add a small amount of blue to the mixture, which will combine with the yellow and create a green sensation. And I do mean a small amount of blue. Blues have high tinting strength, and thus you need very little to impact a mixture. This blue will gray the skin down a little bit, and pull it into what we consider a more realistic flesh. You can also use green directly, as it contains some amount of blue as well as yellow, making it a bit easier to not overwhelm what it is you're doing. So we now have a base flesh tone that comes from a combination of red, yellow, and blue. We can then extrapolate this idea to mean that combinations of various secondaries and primaries can also create skin tones. So something like a violet and yellow can combine into a skin tone, as violet is a combination of red and blue. This resulting color would be effective for creating a soldier on the battlefield, perhaps a Spartan hoplite, as Mediterranean skin tends to lean a little greenish. This mentality of skin tones being a combination of red, yellow, and blue means that any sort of brown color is ripe for being the base of a skin, as all browns are a combination of these tones. In fact, most African skin mixes are really just very deep versions of these lighter skin tones, or vice versa. But even by themselves, tones such as burnt umber and even burnt sienna can make decent flesh tones, or be the basis of experimentation for yourself. The color raw sienna displays this perfectly. This brown only needs a little white added to create a realistic skin, and as you can see, it's really not that hard to create a similar brown out of red, yellow, and blue. I have spoken about this tone previously, but now you know why it is so effective. With all this in mind, you can practice your perception of flesh and mixing your own colors by trying to reverse engineer pre-made tones with these simpler ones. For further readings on creating flesh, I highly recommend Color Mixing Recipes for Portraits, which is a great resource for creating every spectrum of human skin you can think of.
As you can see, skin tones are not particularly challenging once you know what goes into them. With a little bit of technical know-how as the colors that go into one, you can modify your own skin tones or reverse engineer things that you didn't know about before. From here, you can use this information to create your own skin, but also experiment with pre-made mixtures and modify them to however you need them to be. Tune in next week, and we will discuss how to actually apply those skin tones on a model that is a little bit large on the scale of skin present. But with a little bit of knowledge as to the biology of how skin acts, you will see that it is really not that challenging. Take care, and have a good one.